Alice, welcome back to We Love Ugly Data, the Deep Analysis podcast. This is series 3, episode 10. So we're in October. Makes this at least as the way things are looking right now, for the last regular podcast of the year. We've got predictions and we've got awards to do before the end of the year when we'll have Dan on. But today it's just me, and Alan's back from all of his travels. Hi, Alan.
Hello.
So it was August the last time that you and I had a chat, so lots of water has passed under the bridge since then. But for those of you who are joining us for the first time, we have to do the housekeeping, and part of the housekeeping is the format, and part of the format is sending you the format. So this is the format: 3 topics, 30 minutes, roughly 30 minutes, and we overshot by nearly 10 last month, but you know who's counting. Well, I am, obviously, because I remember it's over by 10 minutes. But anyway, that's normally the format. Let's see how close we hit it today. Today is kind of a Salesforce-y focused show, but let's start off with something that back in August wouldn't have been that much of a Salesforce-y subject, but right now it is, and that's Apromore, or Apromore, if you want to take the pronunciation that sometimes we choose to use because it amuses us, but it's not the name of the company. So a couple of weeks ago, so actually just before Salesforce's big conference, they announced that they were acquiring Apromore. They were already an investor in Apromore, so this wasn't the biggest surprise in the world. They were also had a partnership, but then the number of companies that companies that have ISV relationships with Salesforce isn't small. So there was an existing relationship. There wasn't necessarily the most biggest surprise in the world, but for us, who, as you know, with Apromore being a process analysis vendor, and it's an area that we cover a lot in our work intelligence research, was something that I guess, Alan, you could say we had been agitating for a little bit in terms of thinking it was a good match for a company like Salesforce to acquire a company like Apromore. Is that fair?
No, it's 100% accurate, because I probably more than 4 times, but at least 4 times in meetings with Salesforce executives, I personally said, why on earth aren't you buying Apromore? I mean, it makes sense, you know. So I'm not saying that's why they made the deal. That would be stretching it, but I think it's one of those things. It's made sense since day one, and I really think they should have done this deal a long time before. The issue is, as well, not just Salesforce, as everybody's now talking about the agentic enterprise and well, okay, we can talk about that tech all we want, but to actually implement it is a challenge, to say the least. And without process mining and task mining in a large enterprise, I just don't even see how it's done.
So let's just take a pause for a second, because there's a possibility that people could be joining us for this podcast who don't know this technologies very well. So let's just give them a 30-second or so a précis of process mining and task mining, because Apromore covers them both.
They do. I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, I'm talking as somebody who many moons ago was actually a process analyst, right? So, you know, you sat and talked to people. That's what you did, right? And then you drew up flowcharts. I mean, there was a bit more to it than that, but that was it in the basis. Where these tools, process and task mining. Process mining basically pulls the log files essentially from your business applications. And presents them in hopefully a readable and understandable form. And task mining does sort of the same thing, but from your desktop. So it tells you who's clicking and who's moving a cursor here and who's opening this up and what order they're opening up or whatever. Right. So the long story short, it's a shortcut to getting an understanding of what's really happening at the system level, as opposed to what people tell you is happening. It's not a replacement for process analysts, and I would argue these kind of tools in the wrong hands are useless. You actually do need to understand process. I mean, so these tools in the hands of a skilled process analyst are gold. They save 3, 6, 8 months of analysis. They will shortcut so many things. Now, the challenge here is that in some cases, they give you too much detail. In the sense that back in the day, you were only asking questions that were relevant. These things pull up the log files. They pull up everything, right? So, you know, there's a lot of parsing that goes on in the mind of a process analyst to make sense of them. Nevertheless, in big transformations, which is what we were alluding to, and agentic enterprises is arguably the biggest transformation ever, if it's ever to happen, I just don't see how you do a big project without these tools.
Right, and let's hold that thought, because we're going to be doing that in a little bit more detail. Up on screen for people who are watching, you can see there's a post that we wrote with more details about the transaction, a little bit of background on Apromore, a little bit of background about what we think the rationale is for Salesforce, and it's kind of what we're describing now, really. And obviously, all the links that we're talking about, all the material today, will be in the show notes. Show notes may already be on the screen when you're watching or reading this. If they're not, they're on deepanalysis.net at the time this podcast comes out, and it will have links to all the stuff we talk about. I know I mention that every time, but still, it's always worth remembering that's where all that material is. And I think there are a couple of important points there. One is that we're a big fan of process analysis, both process mining and task mining. It, however, is not magic.
Nope.
It requires some work up front. And if you're dealing with things like transaction log files, they're dealing with their cleansing beforehand and making sure that you're feeding the right data in. For a task mining, where you're dealing with kind of capturing clickstream activity from desktops, that requires you almost a little kind of a project in its own right, which is working with your key users and capturing that clickstream data with their permission in real time, so you can see how they're working. So it's both of these things are involved. They are, however, you said, much less involved than the manual method of doing it. And you will, if you're running these projects well, save an enormous amount of time from doing it. However, it still requires skill. It still requires input. It is not something you just switch on and then don't worry about it again. Both on the input, but then on the output analysis side, you then have to go, well, there's a whole bunch of stuff that's come out ahead that told us about our processes. What do we do now? And that still requires probably a greater amount of process analysis skill to understand, well, this is what's going on. This is a bottleneck we might have found thinking about it at its simplest level. What do we do about it? Still requires process skill. And I think that's something which is kind of important when we start to think about what Salesforce, which is a large organization with a very big sales force, small s, a big partner collection, and with both of those parts having big professional services, making a success of something like Apromore is going to take a chunk of time, right? There's a big enablement bit for them to do here.
It's going to take a chunk of time and a chunk of money. Realistically, probably more than they paid for Apromore. I mean, so what in my wish list to Salesforce, or specifically the MuleSoft group, is that they somehow or other bundle this for free, and just basically get a huge training campaign out to get the ecosystem trained up. Because I say I'm a big fan of these. I have a background in process analysis. In the wrong hands, they're useless, these tools, and so they need training. They need a lot of training, but my hope is that somehow or other, whether they give it for free, whether they bundle it, whether they make it low cost, whether they make it mandatory to be used in large projects, I really hope they put some effort behind this, rather than just, oh yeah, we've got one of those, because so what?
Yeah, and I'm thinking of we've got one of those as it's up on the screen for people who are watching, and we'll talk about it for those people who are listening. That's contained within that aforementioned blog post, which will be in the show notes, is that they're not exactly the first. None of these acquisitions have been particularly big or splashy, right? They've been very much what in an M&A focus you might call tuck-in acquisitions, functional acquisitions for companies. So, alongside Salesforce, ServiceNow made a very small acquisition. In fact, the task mining vendor they picked up was previously an Apromore partner. That was in 2023. Appian have made acquisitions here. UiPath have made acquisitions here. Microsoft have made acquisitions here, and none of them have been And in fact, even if you were customers of all of those, you might not know that they have done that. In fact, probably the people who've made the most noise about it have been Appian with Process HQ, from their Lana Labs acquisition in, I don't know, say 2019, 2020, something like that. They're the people who probably made the most of it, and it's been most obvious, and they've been pushing that as a way of creating an on-ramp into new processes into Appian. And that's kind of really what we're getting at for the rationale here. Whether you're thinking about these as being agents, or whether you're thinking about them as being, in the case of UiPath, traditionally RPA, in the case of Appian, maybe more thinking about traditional BPM. All these companies want you to onboard processes into their runtime, because that's when you'll pay for them through them. That's the rationale, regardless, your background as an organization, right?
Yes, I would add two things to that.
Okay,
SAP. So they made a big acquisition. They overpaid, I think, but
True.
whatever. Regardless of that, they can afford it. So yeah, SAP is a big player with the same rationale as you've just described.
Yeah.
I think the Salesforce, the rationale is a little bit different. I would say for Salesforce, this is the catalyst to allow them to connect, understand, and work with other people's applications.
Okay.
Side of core Salesforce, right? So what's Salesforce best known for? CRM. It's a CRM company. Yeah. But for an agentic enterprise, they're going to have to talk to, I don't know, warehouse management systems, ERP systems. They're going to have to talk to lots of different things.
Mm-hmm.
How are they going to do that? Well, we can say connectors and APIs. Well, yeah, at a technical level, okay. But this is the tool that maps it out and says, actually, we only need to connect here because we're only interested in this. The rest of this is irrelevant to what we're doing. So it, again, just to I don't want to go on about this too much, but it really is in the last, 3 years now of generative AI, agentic AI. You can hear the weariness in my voice. Agentic enterprise. This is certainly one of the missing pieces of the jigsaw. And to date, really, yes, maybe Appian, but overall, I don't think people realize how important it is.
Yeah, and you're right. It was remiss of me to not mention SAP Signavio within that piece. Again, I suppose it's one of those things. When you're looking at SAP and process mining, you're thinking about processes which are discrete to SAP. Yeah. And I think in the short term, what we're thinking about here is processes which are discrete to Salesforce clouds. But you're right. The direction of travel is going to be the orchestration of stuff which is both homogeneous and heterogeneous. So stuff coming from outside it in other applications. That's got to be the downstream direction for all of this. There we go. So up on screen now, we mentioned work intelligence. Apromore is one of the vendors that we've covered in there from the very beginning, and in fact, even before that, when Alan was writing the task and process mining market sizing that existed before work intelligence back in the pre-COVID days, they were in there as well. So we've covered them really right from their inception. But if you're interested in work intelligence, there is a whole market analysis. If you're a subscriber, you've already got access to that. If you're not a subscriber, you can purchase it. Links in show notes, as you know. But something else that's you'll lead us a little bit into our next topic is that if you're interested in this, but you want to read something maybe for free, well, that's great, because we do actually publish a whole bunch of research for free. But when we were formulating, what work intelligence was back in 2022, there's a free download paper called Improving Processes by Balancing Human Intelligence and AI. And a lot of the stuff in that is actually suddenly becoming a lot more prescient. And we're finding the things that we wrote in that paper, 3 or so years ago, are actually starting to sound very much like things CEOs are seeing on stage, which is great. So if you want to go back and read that and see maybe what they'll be saying on stage next spring, you can download that for free. Links in the show notes. I pulled out two little quick quotes before we move on to the next subject. Is that a couple of things that we did say in there, which were pull quotes from we used in the original paper. And one is that work intelligence is not digital transformation, but digital harmonization. So we're not talking about ripping and replacing. It chooses to focus on augmentation and continuous improvement through both human and artificial intelligence in proportionate measures. That's kind of important, and I think lots of people are just starting to get there with that balance. And also, and this is probably of most relevance to Apromore and Salesforce acquiring them, the greater range of processes analysed in combination, the better we can understand them in the context of the work itself. And context seems to be the word that everybody is focusing on right now.
Yeah, that's the word of the day.
Word of the day. So that's Apromore. Salesforce was last week. You were out there, Alan. I was watching very much from home. You and I together have been to a lot. I realised I haven't actually been to one for 10 years. My last one was 2015. Yeah, so but I was back in the days where they were trying to cram 200,000 people in there and bringing in cruise ships. That kind of period. It's a wee bit smaller, and that's probably no bad thing. We both wrote some stuff about it. Now, the important thing with Salesforce is there's a lot of product. They like to put a lot of product announcements. In fact, as a company, they are constantly pushing out product announcements. To try and wrap all of this up, the best way to do that is just read their press releases, right? And what we've done to try and catch them all. We're not going to try and cover every piece of product that they do, because it would just be, a thankless, lengthy task. And what we try to do is pick out the stuff that's most relevant. So I wrote something that was, a little bit very much product focused, and probably, if I'm honest, I buried the lead a little bit within the blog post, which is quite a long one, in the sense that I talked up front about the intelligent context unstructured data product, which confused me a little bit, because they briefed us in advance, as they sometimes do, not just us, but lots of analyst firms, and they briefed this product under an entirely different product name. So when they were doing the announcements live, I'm like, hang on a second, what's that product? I'm going through my notes going, I can't find it. And I realized they had briefed us, but they changed the product name at the last minute to intelligent context. So there's some details in there. But I think the stuff that's probably most important, sort of strategically, is go and read the blog post on the product, but actually a little bit about some of the messaging around complexity and context, and kind of a little information about adoption, which I think trying to show not just where Salesforce is, but where this industry is right now over the adoption of agentic. Is that fair, Alan? Because we both independently started to say the same things in the two posts that we wrote without actually really comparing our notes all that much.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, Salesforce is a bellwether for the industry, as is Oracle, as is Microsoft. But there's basically a handful, isn't there, really, when we're talking about software. And Salesforce is definitely one of them. So Salesforce is often a reflection, or Dreamforce, or Agentforce, whatever we want to call it, the big event, is one of those things where you get a feel for what else is going on, where everybody's at. And I think there was a couple of things which came out. And again, in fairness, they're going to get up on stage and give their best story. Of course they are. But there was, and it was a repeated message throughout, two things, basically, that, building and implementing agents is a lot harder than Salesforce and everybody else seemed to think it was a year ago. Now, it sounds like we're bragging here, but we could have told them that. And they're finding out their own way. And it's really hard. And the other thing, which is in your quote, is AI is not enough. AI alone is not enough. And I think that's the other thing which I think is filtering through Salesforce and UiPath and Automation Anywhere and SAP and everybody else, is that, look, we talk about agents, we talk about agentic enterprises, we talk about AI, but the truth is, if you were to pull together some imaginary architectural diagram of a true enterprise, AI is what? 1%, 3%, 5%. It's a small part of a hugely complex IT stack. And so the danger here is that, and I'm not picking on Salesforce, it's everybody's been doing it, there's been this sort of message going out there, oh, don't worry about all of that stuff, AI is going to come and fix it, and the implication is replace it, and that's just not reality. That's
they shifted a little bit in the course of the year, and I'm up on screen for people who are watching it, some of the quotes from the blog post that underline that. Again, it's now very much AI that enables people. Whereas 6 months ago, it was here comes the agentic workforce, and that was very much the message. Now they're saying, look, rather than just turn it on, just kind of it just works, which is very much what they were doing last year. Hey, we enabled 100,000 agents at the show, or whatever they were trying to do last year, which didn't really have any representation of real life. They're now talking about the time to prepare is now. So really, as organizations, you need to get ready for this. So you could say, well, that probably should have been a message last year, really. But that's perhaps being a little bit snippy. The issue I think that they have, and again, we could cover this in a lot of detail in that blog post, is an adoption battle, which is not just a Salesforce's battle, but it's a battle for the industry, which is largely they've yet to convince most organizations, the overwhelming number of organizations, that this is something that, one, that they can deal with, and two, that has a benefit and a use, and they want it. Now,
I think there's a couple of more things there, to be honest.
Okay, go.
I what you just said is 100% correct. And what I would add to that, though, is I think, yes, there's been this year of learning. Oh, wow, this is a lot harder than we thought it was. And actually, AI is just part of the recipe. It's not the recipe itself. There's a lot more to it than that. But I think there's also a horrible disconnect in the messaging, because the messaging, and again, this is industry wide. This is not specific to Salesforce, although they've been doing it too. And I mean, I think the idea of having a robot at the front seat at the Dreamforce keynote, I don't think that was actually.
The robot didn't do anything. It was one of those.
It literally didn't move either.
So sat there.
Yeah, it was. That was not a smart move. But here's the thing: is the disconnect, right? If you are in enterprise IT, if you're an administrator, if you're a developer, whatever, if you're CIO, I don't know, anybody who's involved in tech, that there's an awful lot more here to deal with, right? And yet the messaging from Silicon Valley as a whole has been, oh, we can get rid of people. Oh, look, I hired 4,000 people. I replaced them with bots or agents or robots or whatever term you want to use. And the problem with that is, well, hold on, who is it you're selling to here? The very people you want to replace. A lot as to how they think this is going to go down well.
Well, there has been, and this has always been the case, but it's felt more frequent during this decade, is the vacillation between we're doing well, so let's employ lots of people, thousands more people, and now doing so well, we now can remove large numbers of people. And sometimes we end up with, we're going to hire 5,000 people here in the same month as we're going to 5,000 people over there. It does send out a confusing message, and some of this is for investors. Well, some of this is towards customers.
Yeah, and the messaging over the last 18 months, 2 years has been for investors, but I think it's been at the cost of distancing potential buyers and users. Look, nobody's arguing that things shouldn't be more efficient. I mean, you and I are working on a project now, and I've got my whiteboard over there outside, right? Where basically, in construction, so let's just take construction as an example here,
sure.
Right? We get it, right? I mean, I worked in engineering, it's very, very similar discipline, where, they are, generally speaking, superb at managing documents, right? They because they have to be. You cannot have a carpenter or an electrical engineer with the wrong details in their hands. You just can't do it. But so on the one hand, you've got all this advanced technology that they're implementing and they're building, and on the other hand, you have these piles of paperwork in the back office, right? So I mean, these are just generic, but this is the world in general. I'm using construction, but it's everywhere.
Yeah.
So okay, we all know that this could be done better. I don't want to use the word efficiency. I don't want to say more productive.
Sure.
It can just be done better, right? It can be done better. You can have fewer errors. You can have fewer screw ups. You can have fewer headaches. You can have fewer working over the weekends to find out what the heck went wrong on Thursday.
And remember, this was part of the, just a call back to what we were talking about a couple of minutes ago. This was the basis of what we were trying to do with work intelligence, was that work shouldn't be this difficult for the people doing the work.
It shouldn't be this difficult for the people doing the work. But that clashes horribly with the, we don't need the people doing the work. We can automate. Can you automate it? Well, I mean, we've been doing this for hundreds of years and we haven't figured it out yet. Well, yes, we can automate some of it. And so this was the promise of RPA. If something is done the same way every single time, why not automate it?
Yeah.
Hallelujah. Who's going to disagree with that? Right? It makes sense. And yet that's still in its infancy.
Yeah.
That's still in its infancy. So now where we're saying these are really complex and messy things, and they shouldn't be like that. Oh, I'll just get an agent. I don't get it. So I get it in the sense that I'm repeating myself now. The last 18 months has been all about investors. Yeah, that's the story to investors. Well, I think that story's got to change real fast if you're actually going to get sales and major implementations. Now, you might get sales, but whether they'll get past 6 months of chaos and deliver nothing of value, whether they'll run on for the next year or two, I don't see it.
Yeah. I think, well, that's what probably we'll get to in the predictions show in December, we've been working on those predictions this week. The more broader underlying economic base for this iteration of AI means that one way or the other, there's a bunch of additional costs coming down the track. We're in the age of everything being free, relatively speaking. If we can't make the economic case at this point, what's coming down the track is everybody's going to want their money back for all the investments that have been made. Trillions of dollars of investments are being made. Everything's going to get a bit more expensive. So unless we actually are preparing ourselves for that sort of seismic economic shock that is coming, and it's inevitable one way or the other, then this whole thing is not just built on sand, it's built on vapor.
Well, it's built on vapor, and then there's also, where is this money coming from? So if we're saying I am 70%, I'm just making numbers up here, but if we say 70% of my IT budget is going to pay for the licenses and the maintenance of these business applications, and you're coming in and saying, well, I can cut those costs by 40%. Okay, well, I'm only actually going to save money when I've switched off 40% of those licenses. And today that's not happening. So where's the budget?
Well, then interesting, of course, actually understanding what applications are being used and for what is one of those key use cases for technology like Apromore that we were talking about earlier on. So this stuff is more interconnected than it perhaps seems. Look, I want to move on just a little bit from Salesforce to second. Up on screen is your post from it, which is very much a kind of from the conference floor. Now, both will be in the show notes. If you want to spend some more time with me and Alan going through a lot more of the details about Salesforce, and you're a customer, book some time with us. We were more than happy to go through it. There's a lot to unpack. Even what's in the blog post is a fair bit, but it's still only some highlights. So, please set some time with us to do that. We are more than happy to spend time with our subscribers going through these and working out what the implications are, whether you're a customer of them or not. You've been on the road quite a lot recently, and I thought just before we finish off, we will go through some of this sort of autumn, winter, fall trends. And I noticed I put up on screen for people who can see some of the content Alan has written from his visits to UiPath Fusion, Boxworks, Highland Community Live. You were automation anywhere as well, but I couldn't find anything related to that. So you've been at a lot of stuff, and if people want to go and look at those particular posts, they're of course all be in the show notes. What I'm not asking here is run through them, but thematically, we talked a little bit about, hey, you know what, the feeling from Dreamforce is, hey, complicated things are complicated and difficult, and we can help you. Is the new, much more pragmatic and sensible approach from Salesforce. Is that what we're seeing elsewhere, or are there other themes you're noticing on your travels that are worth calling?
There's two themes, and again, this is not to, I would pick on somebody, by the way, that deserved it, but we're talking about trends here. I would have to say the disconnect between the stage and the audience this year, I've never seen anything like it ever, and I've been doing this a long time.
And you're seeing that across the board of the conferences you're going to?
Across the board. I mean, just to be cliched about it, but actually to be accurate about it. In previous years, and we're proud to announce today, product X, and everybody would cheer and clap.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
Not anymore.
Right.
Just sat there. There's silence. It's crickets. So so going back to what we're talking about, there is a real disconnect between the vendor messaging and the buying community, and that it is palpable when you're there in person. I think the other big trend, and I mean, this is good for us at Deep and Hussis, and I'm happy about it, but it's true. It's about unstructured data and document processing.
Yeah.
I mean, a bunch of these conferences, you know, again, they're doing their pitch about agents and blah, 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 blah. When you talk to the people on the floor, IDP, intelligent document processing, is the on-ramp.
Yeah.
That's where they're focused. That's what they're talking about. And I think, you know, Dan could talk more about this, but I still believe, and I'm going to be hard to change my view on this, IDP is still in its infancy. Yep. In the sense that there's still a perception, oh, it's scanning documents. Well, okay, whatever. Actually, what it is making sense of unstructured data and triggering processes, which is something we've not been able to do until very recently without a huge amount of manual intervention. So, and also unstructured data, what is a large language model? It's a pile of unstructured data, right? So, again, it's how you feed the AI, it's how you train the AI, it's how you trigger workflows, it's how you trigger automation. This is the starting point for most enterprises. And when you're at the conferences and you sit, and I make a point of doing it, when you sit with the actual customers, the buyers, the systems integrators, the consultants, i.e. not the technology staff of the company.
Yeah.
This is the topic of conversation. This is the number one topic of conversation. So unstructured data, documents, whatever you want to call them, that's where people are at. And I think are going to be at for some time. If we go back to some of our surveys, right, whatever, you know, different surveys have slightly different numbers, but it's over 50% of business processes still involve paper.
Yeah.
So just to give a thumbs up to Salesforce, you know, they have developed a pretty decent, actually. Dan's writing a report on it, IDP solution, something they've never had before. So they've had iterations of it over the last year or so, but, you know, at some level, these companies sort of get it, but I'm not sure can you filter upwards? I'm not sure, but I don't know that it quite gets to the executive level.
Yeah.
At the ground, they get it. Is it actually getting through to the most senior people? Not sure it is.
And while you mentioned Dan,
sorry, that's our cat. He's just knocked something over in the kitchen.
Right. Well, we couldn't hear that. I just saw your reaction. On the screen for people who are watching. Dan's written something. He's been up with Highland last week at their European conference at Munich, and has written something about agentic document processing, which is, again, will be in the show notes, which is, you know, very relevant. Again, stepping on from what Alan was writing about a little while ago, and being very much IDP focused as well. Right, that's it. That's full trends. I mean, it was pretty much a big run through that. We are already over time, so I knew the time would go past really quickly. Next time, it will be 3 more probably award winners and 30 minutes to discuss. If everything goes to plan. Alan will be back next time, but until then, thanks for joining us, Alan.
Thank you.
If you've joined us for the first time, welcome. I hope you come back. And if you're joining us before, you deserve an award of your own, frankly. And thank you again for joining us. And we will see you then. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.